Every week, Hillsdale College President Larry P. Arnn joins Hugh Hewitt to discuss great books, great men, and great ideas. This is the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. Also at the Hillsdale College Podcast Network, check out the Radio Free Hillsdale Hour, the Hillsdale College K-12 Classical Education Podcast, The Larry P. Arnn Show, and more, all at podcast.hillsdale.edu.
Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. I'm Hugh Hewitt. That music means it's time for the Hillsdale Dialogue. Once a week, we go very high with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College. And today, Dr. Daniel O'Toole, because today we are doing part 8 in our series on The Republic by Plato. You can go to hughforhillsdale.com to get all the previous dialogues, all 800 of them, including the last 7 on The Republic. I think I'm going to begin this morning with Dr. O'Toole, however. Can I ask Dr. O'Toole a question? Because I'm easily confused by Book 3. Book 4 got a little bit easier for me. Book 3 got very difficult for me, but I'm going to jump to Book 4. Professor O'Toole, does that happen to everyone? Because, I was really lost, like line by line lost.
Yeah, when they're talking about the various kinds of music, but then it becomes clear even Socrates doesn't really know the various kinds of music. Glaucon has a better sense, and Socrates says, "Well, go ask Damon, the guy who really knows about this." Yeah, it is bewildering. There's an important point underlying it, which is that education is character formation. It's a learning to love what's genuinely and truly noble. And that's not what's necessarily most intoxicating or impressive or what elicits the greatest pleasures or passions from us, but a kind of rational nobility, a kind of austerity in things that are simple and graceful and fit their purpose, are fit to their purpose well. And so an education of the soul is an education in learning to see beauty in that way, and then ultimately learning to see beauty in the soul, the proper forms and characteristics that it ought to be. And so there's a serious point there, and it's appealing to Glaucon. Remember we saw the city of pigs, the simple city, the true city, failed because it didn't cater to our great passions for luxury and so forth. And that led to war and conquest. But in Book 3, what you see is, there's the so-called purging of the luxurious city. In fact, you can win over a man like Glaucon not by promising him, treasures and women, but by saying, look, there's something higher and more important to devote yourself to, and that's both the nobility of your character and building a regime with a noble and beautiful education, and being devoted to it, being a serious citizen who contributes to it. In a way, that's more appealing and satisfying than simply satisfying your lusts. So
that is more succinctly put. I said to my wife, I said, I need a machete to get through this jungle. But when you get through the jungle, you get to chapter 4. And when Socrates wants to be clear, he says, look, we want wisdom, courage, temperance, and justice. That's what we want. And I said, okay, we're in the field now. Tell me how we get that. So, Doctor, both of you, I'll just leave it. What is the point of making it so dense, the jungle on music, and then to break free into the high open plain of discuss? I think Book 4 is actually kind of easy compared to Book 3. What is the point of doing that?
Well, so the point is, he doesn't make it dense. It is.
The subject matter itself is.
You want, and it gives you, first of all, this is, the book is an achievement, it is a pinnacle of Western civilization, right? It's one of the great things human beings have done, to write this story. And it has a purpose, which is to call one up. And it also has immediate political purposes. my Harry Jaffa, my teacher, main teacher, he said a great thing one time that was a guide to me and very helpful to me. He said, Socrates was living in a decaying city. And he asks all these questions and he casts so many things in doubt. And that will have the effect of restoring the morale of the city. It gives them a real cause they can live with, see? And that's what we want. That's the conversion. Dan does a very good job early on about talking about Glaucon. And I guess he attributes to Tom Pangle the reflection, which is a good one, that Glaucon is the most important figure in the thing. Of course, outside Socrates, I guess he meant. And
yeah.
that, that, in other words, you get picture of a young man who might have been Alcibiades becoming Xenophon. Maybe he didn't, in fact, become that, but I'm confident that's what Plato wanted for his brother. And Xenophon is magnetic to me. We might get Dan to come and talk about the education of Cyrus sometime, because he's got very detailed thoughts about that, and I've learned some things from him about that. And one of them is, it is not, in the end, a praise of Cyrus. And again, that book is by Xenophon, and Xenophon is a man qualified by action as well as thought to talk about Cyrus, you see. And that makes him an interesting and unique figure. And the same thing about Alcibiades. And so I this book is, because remember, what is the consolation? In the end, honor depends not on what people say about you. It's the reason why honor is deficient. It depends upon deserving it. And how can you do that? And one of the lessons of this book and every great book is that is in your power to command, whatever the circumstance. Read Solzhenitsyn. He writes that his life was saved in the Gulag. He might have ended up a KGB officer. He was on his way. He was an intelligence officer in the military. And he wrote a bad line in a letter criticizing Stalin. And he proceeded then through all of the kinds of prison that they had in the Soviet Union. And he wrote about them and how terrible they were, all of them. And the worst was the Gulag. And he claims that was good for him. And I got something yesterday. I haven't had time to read it yet, from Dan Mahoney, who's a really good guy. And we've just hired him to teach at our Kirby Center. And it's about an essay he's written about something Solzhenitsyn speculated a lot about, which is, can one learn to avoid the Gulag without going to the Gulag?
Huh.
And that's the question you asked earlier, Hugh, that led to this last conversation. Can we get out of this? Well, the answer is, my opinion is, we can if we learn.
You just gave the most succinct definition of and defense for the approach of Hillsdale. We've done 800 of these conversations that I've heard. The Republic is the pinnacle of Western civilization. We need young people to learn it so that they will call one up. And I'd like Dr. O'Toole to comment on that. Is that what you think the purpose of the Republic is, to call one up?
Yeah, I mean, it's the Republic itself, in describing politics and education, educates the soul, and it does that by eliciting in the soul its great longings and concerns, and helps you to see what it is you truly want, both in the world and for yourself. And it does force upon you a kind of reflection, of course, about what's really possible and what isn't.
So hold it right there. I'm going to come right back with Dr. O'Toole, of course, Dr. Arnn, on what is really important and what really isn't. But first, I want to remind everyone, all things Hillsdale can be found at hillsdale.edu. Go there to sign up for the absolutely free old snail mail imprimis, the speech digest that Hillsdale sends out monthly, or to watch any of their video courses. And for all of the previous Hillsdale dialogues, including all of our conversations about the Republic, this is part 8, and we haven't even begun book 4 yet. We get there in a couple of weeks. Here's what you do. You go to hugh4hillsdale.com.
Hi, I'm Benjamin Payne. At the K-12 Education Office at Hillsdale College, we support school founding groups and their efforts to start classical schools across the country. Finding the right leader is one of the first and most important steps to building a successful school. While we do consider experience in education, we seek candidates who exhibit unwavering personal integrity, honesty, courage, and servant-hearted leadership. Perhaps that's you. If you're looking to engage in fulfilling, impactful, and challenging work protecting our nation's future and building up the next generation of virtuous citizens, we'd love to hear from you. I'm looking for strong school leaders right now. Learn more about how you can make a difference at hillsdale.edu/leader. hillsdale.edu/LEADER. That's hillsdale.edu/leader.
America. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway with Dr. Larry Arnn, president of Hillsdale College, and Dr. Daniel O'Toole, assistant professor of political theory there. I'm talking with Dr. O'Toole. We were on book 3 when we went to break, Dr. O'Toole.
I was going to say about book 3, it's the reason it's bewildering is because it reminds you of the ultimate end of politics, which is not merely material. The end or purpose of politics is character formation, and in order to have decent politics, you need character formation. Hence, in a way, you could say the end of politics is education, and education is necessary to have decent politics. Now, of course, as one can see and reflect both by reading the Republic and the founders and so forth, there's a danger in trying to install a regime that wholly shapes the soul and gives it the true or proper convictions. But one has to see that the political community always seeks to do that, and there's a serious case for it. And so book 3 is complicated because it's about the education of the soul. It's not merely about the material conditions of the community. It's about the liberal education, and that means the literature, the theological, the moral views that shape the elite in particular, and about the relationship of their views to the body, and in particular about death. You know, how we live and what is our education in light of the fact that we're mortal beings. So all of that, in a way, is what politics and education concerns. And then there's finally this complicated issue of the elite. And I don't mean to sound too elitist, so to speak, but it turns out that that those who are most ambitious, intelligent, powerful in a regime shape the horizon, the views of everybody. They install the laws. And so it's their education that matters first and foremost. And they're the ones who interest Socrates. And there's some complicated things. First of all, there are those who are especially spirited, and there are those who are, you say, natural nerds, those who want to dominate and rule, who are manly, but need to learn a kind of moderation and need to learn to respect education and other sorts, and vice versa. Those who are bookish, who want to avoid the hard and difficult work of the world, which includes war fighting and the ability to resist tyranny and so forth. And they need to have hardened bodies, and they need to have a kind of acceptance of the fact that they're going to die and not be worrying about their death or the death of others. This is a natural necessity. Anyway, all of these things are a complicated political challenge. How do you get your elite to look beyond itself, but also be hard and tough and difficult? Education,
so I have
politics, all concerns.
2 big questions to ask you both before we get out.
Yeah.
Number one, we have right now in the world 3 would-be philosopher kings. They're bad philosophers, but they're definitely kings. Putin, Khamenei in Iran, and Xi Jinping in China. Arguably, they all have absolute power. Arguably, they all have a theory. Did they go too far? Are they trying to be philosopher king? And then the second question is, I joked earlier about the young being quiet. in the presence of the old. Dan, you're not young, but they are obviously talking about young people under the age of 25 or 30. I think one of our problems today is that we elevate young people to positions of authority in Washington for which they are wholly unprepared. And Supreme Court, I just would like your comments or your questions on both of those, which are on my notes, having read all the way through the end of chapter 4, which we will return to. Dr. Arnn, let me begin with you on both of those.
Well, to understand all of those rulers you just named, and I don't understand them all deeply, but all of them are wedded. Well, I don't know. Are they all? I think that these radical Muslim countries are deeply affected by the modern doctrines of totalitarian science that
merged with Wahhabism. It's sort of medieval Muslim Islamic extremism.
No, it's not. What it is heaven on earth, control everything in society. And that's certainly going on in China, and they're very skillful at it.
And skillful at it in China, but not so skillful at it in Iran, where the demonstrations keep breaking out. Well, we'll talk more about that. Don't go anywhere, America. Dr. Arnn, Dr. O'Toole will be right back. All things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. All prior dialogues, including the first 7 in this series on the Republic, at hugh4hillsdale.com. Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Dr. Larry Arnn, Dr. Daniel O'Toole are in the house talking about the Republic, and we've ended up at the People's Republic of China. Back to that, on to you, Dr. Arnn.
Again, that's a regime that can't lead anywhere good, right? Because first of all, the conversion of science into technology, science is knowing. It's what the Republic invites you to do. Figure this out, and once you engage in that activity seriously, you will protect the activity of figuring it out. Figuring it out should be responsible, as Socrates is. He died for his country, risked his life for his country, and then died for his country, and said explicitly he would not flee execution because he was obedient to the laws. The laws were bad. Still, he was, right? So tyrants don't like him. See, the people who killed Socrates, they didn't like him calling into question the basis of their rule.
Yeah.
And so one of the test of a regime is, does it protect inquiry into the best thing? And is that inquiry undertaken by people who mean the best? And, if you look at the professorate in America, a lot of it has converted now. Because what a professorate is, we're looking at Dan's study and my study. And I'm a part-time professor. But the life of a professor is not, in one sense, an important life. It's a deeply influential life in a close scale. And so professors were kind of like monks. Now they think of themselves, so many of them do, as rulers.
Yeah.
Applied philosophy, right? And they think that they're authorities. They have an authority over people because they're wise. And they don't even believe in wisdom, by the way. They believe in expertise, which is something different. And you just read the Republic, right? Is that going to work? And that's written by somebody who was, in fact, a philosopher, who turned in his life from attempting to establish an ideal republic, in fact, in which he found out he wasn't very good, couldn't be done, to drawing one in principle to encourage. First of all, remember, you can't read the Republic when you complain about it being dense, right? These things are dense.
I didn't complain. I merely noted.
Yeah. Well, why? But you did say, why did he make it dense? He didn't.
Yeah.
They're just dense. And when I encourage people to go or not go to law school, or go or not go to graduate school, I try to pay attention to what they're like, right? Because if they're like Dan, they shouldn't go. Because he'd be unhappy at that.
Very unhappy.
He'd be good at it.
Very unhappy.
But he'd be good at it, right? But in one way, it might even be good for him. But
I don't know. I'm wondering. I'm having doubts right now.
Then I meet others, like I won't name names, I guess, because I'll insult some. But I've met,
You have 10 Supreme Court clerks. You met 10 people who needed to go to law school.
I met more than that.
Yeah.
And those people, I know them really well. I've known them, stay in touch with them. They stay in touch with me since they graduated. Those people can be trusted with power.
Yeah.
And that's because they live their life right and they have their priorities right. And none of the 10 is deeply impressed by the fact that they served on the Supreme Court. They think it was a privilege. And they have great respect for the people they worked with and for the office that they held. And they don't think that they were entitled to it. They have to earn that. And part of the way you earn that is not thinking that the power of the law. Because remember, what happens in this, in one way, Socrates deserved to be killed. Because Socrates introduces in this book and others the distinction between justice simply and justice is what the law says. And that involves a rebellion,
Yeah.
And
yeah.
He's very courageous about that while being obedient to the law as far as possible. And
now I want to move to the young with Dr. O'Toole before we run out of time. And here's a fun fact to know and tell. Justice Robert Jackson, who was our chief prosecutor at Nuremberg, had a clerk at the time he wrote the Youngstown Sheet and Tube steel seizure cases, whose name was Rehnquist. Rehnquist went on to write the majority opinion in Dames and Moore, which is the Iranian Claims Tribunal, the second great in a trio of presidential power cases. His clerk at the time, Rehnquist's clerk, was named Roberts. Justice Roberts just wrote Trump versus the United States, the most relevant and recent opinion on presidential power. All three of those justices were young men under serious people, but you did not hear from them until they were 45 or older. What do you think about the rise of the young in government?
Yeah, I mean it's a constant challenge. You could say the normal thing in human affairs is rule by the elders of some sort or another. You can immediately recognize, first of all, you know who the old are, and you can recognize something in their experience that's a reflection, if not a perfect reflection, of wisdom. But of course, in desperate situations, one isn't simply so deferential to the old. Then you kind of look around and you think, wait, really, who should be in command here? Who just has the natural virtues or abilities? In politics, you have to mix both, a kind of natural deference to established authority, including the older, with talent and drawing out talent. And it's an important thing to figure out early on, 20s and 30s, who has natural abilities, intelligence and ambition together, and to try to give them real experience so they figure out how the world works, and real authority. I do think it's our problem is not so much that the young are simply powerful. I mean, in some ways you could say the young are stifled in our regime with certain, don't quite have the positions of leadership that they might have had in earlier times. I'm sympathetic to that claim. On the other hand, our young are uniquely uneducated or maleducated. And so there's a kind of arrogance that our young have. I'm thinking of the millennials. I'm thinking of my friends who went and worked in the Obama administration. I mean, I don't have many friends who worked in the Obama administration, but who went to D.C. Around that time, knew nothing of history, and yet thought they knew everything. And that class of people is most powerful within our regime, has been in the Biden presidency, and will be if Kamala is elected. So I would say the problem is not empowering the young. The problem is the education of the young.
I want to close here with Dr. Arnn, because we spent a year talking about Churchill. And Churchill became a great statesman because as a young man, he was well educated, often by himself on the Indian frontier, but also deeply experienced in life and death matters. And I don't think we have anywhere near the number of people we need like that right now, which is a problem. And you get the last word on our 8th episode on the Republic.
Well, because I believe that, people are the chief agents in the making of themselves. The bad news about Churchill, as an example, is he was a genius. And
yes,
so it's hard to reproduce that. But having said that, we are failing in a way that Dan indicated, and that is we don't excite young people with the idea that they should know, that it's beautiful to know, that you can learn things that are worthy to know and make your life better because you know. And we don't, and that's why, the elite universities, many of them across the country, simply failed to function in the spring. They couldn't have class. And that's, kind of basic, right? Can you go to class? And they weren't. And that's because people with adamant views about principles and historical events, knowing next to nothing about them, were demanding that the whole university and the whole country reverse themselves and adopt policies. And these people are 19 years old, right? And they haven't been acquainted with the fact that you can figure stuff like that out, and it's wonderful to do so. And so that's that thing that Dan mentioned, right? We are raising up a class of person that's not been introduced. And, I hold that young people want to know that by nature.
Yeah.
And Dan said early in these dialogues about Plato that you just have to read this. Better to have a teacher. It'll help you, And, we Straussians learn not to read the interpretive essay. You pick that up yourself. You mentioned it from Harvey, right? But Dan says, well, okay, but have a little humility here. These guys are pretty smart. Right. and they've done a lot of work. They can help you get going, and that's what the young need. And they,
it's my proposition.
I'll put it.
It's my proposition that Hillsdale is taking over the Beltway because its students are simply the best educated, and as against the ignorant that are coming out of other universities, there is no challenge to them. It's like straw men marching on Bunker Hill. They're not going to get up the hill against Hillsdale graduates because Hillsdale graduates are educated. And I don't know, though, that you turn out enough of them. Last word to both of you, because we got to close in 2 minutes.
Well, first of all, not everybody is going to get a serious education, no matter what we do.
Yeah.
Everybody can get a decent education. And so we're doing that in the millions, right?
You are doing that primarily through all of the video courses that Hillsdale does, and 1,000, maybe 1,200 kids a year up at Hillsdale itself. Go get your application for next year at hillsdale.edu. Go watch all of those courses that can help you be smart about the world and where we came from, why we are a constitutional republic, why we don't want to go back to the progressive era. If you want all of the prior Hillsdale dialogues to listen to as you run, walk, or exercise, they're all collected at hugh4hillsdale.com. But all things Hillsdale at hillsdale.edu. Come right back for today's final segment on the Hillsdale Dialogue.
It's no secret that Americans are more divided than ever. And it's not just over what policies will improve our great country. No, it's over whether America is great at all, whether America deserves our love. That's why Imprimis is so important. Imprimis looks at the issues of the day from a constitutional perspective, reminding citizens always of our great heritage of liberty. For more than 50 years, Imprimis has featured speeches from the smartest conservative thinkers and writers at Hillsdale events. These days, Hillsdale publishes people like Molly Hemingway Andy Puzder, Harmeet Dillon, and Chris Rufo. Over 6.4 million American households and businesses receive Imprimis absolutely free. And I urge you to sign up for it today at no charge. To get your free lifetime subscription, go to hillsdale.edu/lifetime right now. Or text the word Imprimis to 71844 and we'll send you a link to sign up for your free lifetime subscription. That's IMPRIMIS to 71844.
Welcome back, America. I do want to reemphasize, I'm Hugh Hewitt. The Hillsdale Dialogue is underway. I want to emphasize, if you want your application for next fall to join Hillsdale, go to hillsdale.edu. That's where you will find it. You can also sign up for Imprimis there. You can find all of the, for free, video courses. By the way, they prompt you to move along. They'll send you, hey, you still watching this course? It's a great thing. They don't overwhelm you with emails. They just prompt you occasionally to remind you you are at part 4 of a dialogue on church, whatever it might be. If you love this dialogue, and many of you do, you listen every week, you can go back at the very beginning, go back to Homer and to Job at hughforhillsdale.com. That's hughforhillsdale.com. Dr. Arnn.
I just gave the honor code talk 2 weeks ago, and it's just thrilling to do. It just, I just love that. 383 freshmen, and they're tense. And they know this is going to be the devil of a thing, and they got to get their boots on, right? And then, and they're volunteer, right? They want to come here. Hard to get in. We recruit by threatening them, right? And that means that they have selected themselves. We select them too, but willingness, in my opinion, is a shade more important than ability, because they have to give themselves to the work. Not everybody's going to do that, but if enough do it. And then what everybody can do that. Everybody can know reading, writing, and arithmetic well. And everybody can use that to get knowledge. And the knowledge they get is of the human things and the natural things. Human things are natural too, but they're a special kind of nature. And so you need to know history and literature and philosophy, and you can know. And civics is very important. And then you need to know chemistry and physics and biology and math. And everybody can know that to a level of competence, even advanced competence. And that can be done in the school and in the schools. And remember, the thing that's burgeoning right now in America, the most hopeful thing is the growth of charter schools and such, right? And we have 100 of them or so, and can't find teachers fast enough. And headmasters fast enough. We can start them all day long. And we're going to start 7 or 8 a year down the road. And those schools are thriving, right? And they're hard. Everybody, we believe in teaching Latin. All the schools have to teach Latin. And the reasons are two. One is Latin. Latin is a basic and ancient language and the basis for many modern languages. And the 3 reasons. Second, some beautiful things are written in Latin. And third, Latin is hard. So the first step is hard. You want your kid to come to this school? This school's hard. And that's the key thing, right? Because then you're inviting them as a first step to give themselves for something. One of my favorite things to say is, I taught the capstone course to half the senior class, first 2 the other night. And it was just riveting good. Right? Because they're seniors now and they're mature and they don't giggle when you look at them. But they're suckers for noble undertaking, especially to do with the life of the mind. Yeah. And I tell the freshmen, you're going to have to suffer. And when you say that, they sit up straighter. They want to suffer. And when you say to the seniors, you have suffered. Remember, you have to keep suffering, because to grow is to suffer. You got to do the dense bits too, see? And you've got to come to love them because they're dense. And when you say that to them, They're excited, and I walk across the campus probably every day. And if I see a bunch of kids having fun, and you see them everywhere, I'll say, "Are you kids suffering?" And they always answer, "Suffering? We're suffering right now." See, and that's
more so now than ever.
It's serious work, and to live a serious life is to devote yourself to serious work. And so
we're going to end it there, but I'm going to tell Professor O'Toole we will be back in part 9 on the Republic in book 4 with the 4 good things: wisdom, courage, prudence, moderation, I guess, and justice. Wisdom and prudence being together. Whether or not Dr. Arnn joins us, I don't know.
You sound like Rick Perry.
Yeah, I got 3.
Let me stick this in here. Dan is doing a great job, and he's sensitive to any criticism because this is important to him, and he's important.
Sensitive guy.
but I will add this. I may or may not be here next time, but if I'm not, I will use some words that Austin Chamberlain, Neville Chamberlain's half-brother, wrote to the French finance minister about Winston Churchill. "Are you coming to the conference?" And Austin Chamberlain wrote of Winston Churchill, "If you keep a dog, you don't have to bark yourself."
Let the audience think on that when they understand their colleagues on the faculty and they are relations by marriage, and the better of all 3 of us is actually married to both of them. Thank you all. That wraps up today's Hillsdale Dialogue. We'll be back next week on the Hillsdale Dialogue. All the dialogues available at hillsdale.edu and, of course, at hughforhillsdale.com. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, Harley. Thank you, Generalissimo. We'll talk to you on Monday on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Thanks for listening to the Hillsdale Dialogues, part of the Hillsdale College Podcast Network. More episodes at podcast.hillsdale.edu or wherever you find your audio. For more information about Hillsdale College, head to hillsdale.edu.